Hello and welcome to another episode on the Public Global. I am Ajay Prakash. Pradhan Mantri Garib Kalyan Anna Yojana, Modi ji's flagship scheme, his mastermind for the poor of this country. He distributes 5 kgs free ration every month to about 75% of Indians. Stay with me throughout this episode because I'm going to show you here how much of Garib Kalyan did actually Modi ji do. That is, how much did he really work for the welfare of the poor of this country. Ever since the Modi government came to power in 2014, I'm sure one thing you must have noticed, and that is that this government loves to operate behind a shroud of secrecy. They don't want things to come out, they don't want information to be leaked, they don't want people to have access to data. Because if the government is transparent and information comes out into the public domain, people will start questioning Mr. Modi. And that is one thing he really hates. He doesn't like people to question him. He doesn't want to be answerable to anyone. When Mr. Modi is around, nothing is ever so simple. Whenever this government comes out with any statement or any announcement or any government scheme, take a magnifying glass and look into it. I'm sure you're going to find a few surprises. It's not every day that you would hear an episode on the Ministry of Rural Development or the Ministry of Consumer Affairs. Now, the very fact that you see people like Shivraj Chauhan, these are stalwarts of BJP, he's the Minister of Rural Development, and then Prahlad Joshi, another BJP stalwart who handles the Ministry of Consumer Affairs and Food and Public Distribution. This comes from the fact that these two ministries have huge budgetary allocations. The union budget for Ministry of Rural Development this year is 1,88,754 crores, and the budgetary allocation for the Ministry of Consumer Affairs, Food and Public Distribution is above 2 lakh crores. In this episode today, I'm going to talk about Modi government's flagship scheme. One scheme which has been widely publicized by this government, and yet many of us here really don't know too much about this scheme. I'm going to today talk about the Pradhan Mantri Garib Kalyan Anna Yojana (PMGKAY). This was launched during the pandemic in March 2020 to address the economic hardships caused by the pandemic at that time. And under this scheme, free food grains up to 5 kg per person per month were distributed to all the affected poor people. Speaking at a public rally in Surat a couple of days ago, the Prime Minister stated with over 81 crore beneficiaries, the Garib Kalyan Ann Yojana has emerged as the world's largest food security program. He emphasized that the central government's commitment to food security, announcing that the scheme has been extended for another 5 years, that is from January 2024 onwards. You might be wondering that what is there to talk about in this Yojana? After all, the poor needed help during the pandemic. Modi came up with this idea. It was a good idea to give them rations because they had lost their jobs at that time. But then this scheme went on being extended one after the other. The latest extension came in just before the last Lok Sabha election when Modi decided to extend it by another 5 years. That means it will go up to the next elections, which are due in 2029. And were I to ask you what was this scheme all about, I'm sure all of you would know the details. Mr. Modi, after all, he cares so much for the poor of this country, came up with this wonderful scheme during the pandemic where 5 kgs of free rations per person per month was distributed. As they say that all that glitters is not gold, so is the case with anything that is announced by Mr. Modi or his ministers. In this case, the Pradhan Mantri Garib Kalyan Ann Yojana is also full of truths and half truths. Before I proceed further, I just want you to take a moment and request you to subscribe to this channel if you haven't already done so. Your subscription will go a long way in assisting us to make these programs. Thank you very much. The present government has to attribute anything and everything it does to Mr. Narendra Modi. So much so that the Garib Kalyan Yojana was also attributed to Mr. Modi as if Mr. Modi had used his personal funds to distribute the free ration. Ms. Nirmala Sitaraman, the finance minister, in a visit in Telangana a couple of years ago, started yelling at the collector over the missing prime minister's photo at a Telangana ration shop. In order to understand what Mr. Modi has really done under the Garib Kalyan Yojana, I'll have to take you back to 2013 when the National Food Security Act was passed by the then Manmohan Singh government. The National Food Security Act, also known as the Right to Food Act, was signed into a law on September 12, 2013, which aimed to ensure food and nutritional security by providing subsidized food grain to a significant portion of the Indian population. Two different types of target groups were identified. The first was Antodaya Anna Yojana ration card holders, which were poorest of the poor of our country. This act entitled them to receive 35 kg of food grain for the entire family per month at a subsidized rate. The second target group was the people holding the priority distribution ration card. These people could receive 5 kg of food grain per person per month at the subsidized rates. The rate of the food grains at that time was rupees 3 per kg for rice, rupees 2 per kg for wheat, and rupees 1 per kg for coarse grain like the chana. When Mr. Modi announced the Pradhan Mantri Garib Kalyan Anna Yojana in 2020, who were the beneficiaries? These were all those people who were already registered under the National Food Security Act of 2013. In April 2020, there were 75 crore beneficiaries. June 2021, the figure rose marginally. November 2021, it came down to 74.4 crores. By March 2022, it became 79 crores, and by September 2020, the figure touched about 80 crores. As of June 30, 2023, there were approximately 71.15 crore people who were holding the priority household ration card, along with 8.95 crore Antodaya Ann Yojana cards, benefiting a total of about 80 crores people in our country. If you have observed this data a little carefully, you would find that one myth that the opposition keeps harping upon against the Modi government, that the number of poor in this country has increased during Modi's period, and that's why he's giving free ration to 80 crore people. Now, let me tell you one fact. In 2013, when the National Food Security Bill was enacted, at that time there were a little over 80 crore beneficiaries. Now, all through these years, last 12 years, the ration cards have been pruned to scale down. And if you assume that our population has increased by 25 to 30 crores during the last 10 years, and still there are only 80 crore ration people who are given free ration, then definitely there is some decrease in the number of poor people as a percentage of our population. I now want you to pay a little more attention as I'm going to talk of some numbers that will show how Mr. Modi did some jugglery and projected himself as a great savior for the poor of his country. And one would think that the expenditure for the government would have drastically gone up because all this free ration was being distributed. Yet, in reality, he managed to bring down the expenditure of the government and yet give free ration. Now, how did that happen? In fact, the expenditure of the union government over the years on food subsidy has been declining. The peak was in 21-22 when about 6.9% of the budget was spent on food subsidy. Last year in 24-25, the expenditure was 4.25% of the budget. It was 2,05,250 crore rupees. And in 2023, the Pradhan Mantri Garib Kalyan Yojana, when it was extended for a period of 5 years, the government has committed 11.8 lakh crores to be spent in the next 5 years, which means it will be averaging a little less than 2 lakh crores every year. Remember, the population will still keep rising, yet the number of poor in that category are set to decrease. When the Pradhan Mantri Garib Kalyan Yojana was launched in 2020, the provisions then stated that it provides additional free food gains of 5 kg per person per month to National Food Security Act beneficiaries on top of their regular NFSA entitlements. So the left parties in 2020 did criticize Narendra Modi, saying that at least 10 kg of ration is required per month to prevent hunger and death. Well, these people did get 10 kgs. 5 kgs they were buying at a subsidized rate, and 5 kgs came free to them. The reason I showed you that news item from 2020 regarding the criticism, the reason is that Modi, when he was Chief Minister of Gujarat in 2013 and the National Food Security Bill was enacted, well, he criticized the Manmohan Singh government at that time. Apart from stating that the Congress led UPA government was rubbing salt on the wounds of the people who were already grappling with price hike, Narendra Modi also wrote a letter. I'm going to read a few paras from that letter. This letter of Narendra Modi to the then Prime Minister Manmohan Singh is available on the Bharatiya Janata Party's website under the press release section. Now, this letter, I'll just go down and read. Mr. Modi says in the letter, I am also pained to note that the Food Security Ordinance does not assure an individual of having 2 meals a day. I fail to understand how food security for the individual is being assured. The proposed entitlement of 5 kg per month per person implies the supply of only 165 gram per person per day. Persons involved in labor intensive activities require about 2,500 calories per day as per NIN 2009 recommendation. As 100 gram of food grain gives about 350 calories, 165 gram would provide only 500 calories per day, which is hardly 20% of his daily calorie requirements. When the Garib Kalyan Yojana was implemented in 2020, everyone started to get 10 kgs of ration. And that was in line with what Mr. Narendra Modi had said when he was the Chief Minister of Gujarat. So everything was going on well till we reach January 2023. In January 2023, the government quietly and without making much of a fuss announced that the Garib Kalyan Ann Yojana was being merged with the National Food Security Act, providing all the ration that was going to the card holders for free, eliminating the additional provisions introduced during the pandemic. While making this announcement, the Food Minister, Mr. Piyush Goyal, said it has been merged with the Food Security Act. The free portion of that scheme has been added. Now, the entire quantity of 5 kg and 35 kg under the NFSA would be available free of cost. There is no need for additional food grains. A very simple thing which was made so complicated that no one could have understood what Piyush Goyal is saying. And I am sure you would not have understood this too. In simple terms, what the government did is they cut down the provisions by half. The 10 kg which was being given earlier was cut down to 5 kg. The 5 kg ration would come free, and the poor did not have the option to buy another 5 kgs at the subsidized rate of 3, 2, or 1 rupee. The government did this for many reasons. First, of course, was to cut down the food subsidy bill, and secondly, they were under tremendous pressure on the food grain production front. India was producing less of food grain, so the supply was becoming an issue. In the end, I'll just run through a quick calculation showing you the net effect on the poor of these people after Modi ji withdrew the Food Security Act provision. Till December 31st, 2022, under the National Food Security Act, the ration card holders of AAY would get 35 kg of ration per family per month, while the priority household card holders would get 5 kg per person per month. Rice was at 3 rupee kg, wheat was at 2 rupee kg, coarse grains at 1 rupee per kg. Approximately, a family would be spending about 105 rupees if they were to purchase 35 kg of rice per month. And then in 2020 came the Pradhan Mantri Garib Kalyan Yojana, which entitled every person to free 5 kg of ration per month. So for a family, the spend remained 105, and yet they were receiving 70 kilogram of rations. After January 1st, 2023, the allocations under the National Food Security Act became nil. That was, however, replaced with the 5 kg free ration under the Garib Kalyan Yojana. So the total spend became zero for 35 kg of ration. If this additional quantity of 35 kgs were to be bought at market rates, this would cost more than 1,000 rupees. It might be possible that these people get subsidized ration through some other state government schemes through the PDS system. I'm not quite aware. But yet, Modi ji was successful in reducing his subsidy bill by half, and yet the trumpet was still being blown that Modi ji is giving free ration. He stopped the National Food Security Act provisions and converted it into Prime Minister Garib Kalyan Ann Yojana with a stamp of Modi. Thank you for watching. I'll again see you next week.